Hi, everybody. It's January 17th, 2019, and it's time for my private audio call. Tonight, our special guest speaker is Bob Locke, the debt lawyer, who knows all about Anna's stuff and other things. Welcome, Bob. So glad to have you with us.
Thanks, Andy. So nice to be here. It's great to receive the email. I've been thinking about you, and so it was kind of weird. All of a sudden, it showed up in my inbox, and I was like, I was wondering how you were doing. Sam and I were talking about you.
Oh, how's Sam doing?
Sam's doing great. He's rocking.
Good for him. I'm glad.
Living the dream in Idaho.
Good for him. He deserves it. His wife also. They're such good people. But anyway, give him my regards, please, next time you speak to him.
I absolutely shall.
Thank you.
Yeah,
so
we got to get him.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said we've got to get him on here.
Absolutely. I love when he comes on. He's the one who got me started doing all of this.
Oh,
on
he's
the phone.
So smart.
Yeah,
he's so smart, and life throws curveballs at him, and he just dishes them up, and pitches them out, no problem.
Yeah, he's a good guy,
Yeah.
But you said you had something new to update us with, so let us have it. I have a terrible head cold right now, so if I sound funny, I'm sorry. It's just I'll be fine.
That's all right. I'm looking at your picture online, and you look great, so don't worry.
Oh, thanks. I don't look like that right now, though. I'm still in my jammies. I was in bed all day.
But who was it that said, it's better to look good than to feel good, and you look marvelous, darling.
Thank you, darling. Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's been really, really interesting, and I know you had Dan Benham on last week, and I really wanted to listen into that call and pipe in with some questions because he's just so brilliant. And so I'm going to go back and listen to that. But I don't know if you're seeing it, but in my mind, as I'm watching and working kind of, in the trenches on this stuff with people, things are changing quickly. There's defensive roadblocks that are being thrown up. And at the same time, there are tools that are coming out and information that's coming out that is just incredibly enlightening to wake people up and help them to work the system. To me, I think about it in terms of that name, that vessel that was registered, anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks after your nativity, and that vessel, is presumed lost at sea, and it's incumbent upon you, although they never tell you that, to come forward and essentially announce yourself, present yourself, and this goes back to 1666 to the Sets-KV Act. In Section 4, and when you do, at that point in time, your estate's vest. There's no formal process that needs to be gone through. You don't have to probate and all of that stuff, but you can. But if you're going to probate, then you better be in a position to be able to navigate that vessel. So I liken it to remember the old Gilligan's Island sitcom, Andy?
Sure, of course, yeah.
Okay. So, for most of our lives, most of us are presumed to be Gilligan. All right. If anything goes wrong, it's your fault and you're responsible for it and you're going to pay for it. And our job, our mission in life is to be the skipper. And that's really what Anna has always, and the team have always, push towards, is opening up people's eyes and trying to make the process as simple as possible. And I know I've told you this before, but for people that are on, and haven't listened to any of those, this has been, a years-long process, obviously. And we have, I remember, it's almost 3 years now, that Anna and I first started dialoguing, and she sent me her number and she said, call me. And we talked a number of times at length. And she said, you know what, you've got to come up here. I've got 10, 12 people, other ex-attorneys, lawyers, paralegals, researchers, and you need to come up and sit at the table, and we need to go through all this stuff. And at that point, if you're looking at what I call status correction, what Anna talks about in terms of, you know, recording your claims to your name and your estate on the record, we probably had a sheaf of paper that was, you know, it might have been 150 pages, might have been 135, but it was thick. And when we walked away from that initial conclave after about, I was there for about a week, but there were people that were there for 2 weeks. We had boiled it down to probably 55 pages. And over the time in the interim to today, we've boiled that down to basically 5 or 6 documents that, you know, you're talking about a package that constitutes 20, 30 pages maximum. And it's fairly straightforward. If you've done things like gone and read Anna's books, the one that I all of her stuff is great, and obviously you don't have to read the books. You can go through the blog posts. But in my mind, every American, it should be her book. You know something's wrong when. What is it? An affidavit of probable cause. It should be required reading for every school child, because it gives you history of this country that nowhere else have I ever found it. And when I first bought the book, and you can get it online, you know, as an ebook, and I don't know what it is, you know, $5, $10, whatever. But I bought the paper book, and it's illustrated, which is hilarious. And the illustrations are fantastic, and they really kind of help everything sink home. But I've been studying this stuff for decades, and she was coming up with documents and references and things like that touched on things that I didn't. I knew they were out there. Things like those were out there, but I never had been able to find them. And she referenced them chapter and verse so that I could, and I'm anal, so I see a reference and then I'm immediately, okay, you know, put a bookmark in the book and get on the computer and go to Google Scholar or wherever and pull up that reference document and read it and verify that it says what she says it does. And as I started to check off the boxes as document after document after document after reference, et cetera, it became apparent to me that this was some special stuff. And it's the foundation for everything that we're doing. And from that foundation, there's some really, really interesting things you can do. Once you get yourself in a position where you can be the skipper and not Gilligan, then you can do things like a buddy of mine just did down in Texas, and we're working to replicate this right now. He sent a fax into the IRS with a couple of IRS forms and a couple of affidavits, and a letter in the form of an affidavit to at that point John Koskinen, and obviously now it would be to, you know, his predecessor or his successor. And I'm trying to find his name. If anybody remembers that, I've got it scribbled down on a piece of paper because I put it on the document. But anyway, to the Commissioner of the Treasury, and you look at what he did was he said, I'm attaching some documentation and some information, and please correct your records to properly reflect the fact that for all intents and purposes, to simplify it, that vessel is not me, and I'm not the surety for that vessel. And this is my relationship to that vessel. And so the number that's attached to that vessel is not attached to me, which your records indicate that it does. And he waited, and he didn't get any kind of a response for a while. And then all of a sudden, he got a manila envelope from the IRS that, and he had e-faxed this to them. And it had the IRS's return address information up in the top left corner of the manila envelope. And then, I don't know if anybody on the call has ever seen this. If you do, pipe up in the chat. They had handwritten his name, upper and lower case, and put in his CO postal address, and in ink. And he opened it up, and it had his e-fax that they had received, and they stamped it received. But it was weird because he had sent it in like the end of September, and they had stamped it received in November, and they tried to scratch out the e-fax receipt date, but they did a poor job, so you could still see the date there. And then on the letter that he sent to the commissioner, there was again handwritten across the top right of the affidavit was his last name, and then what was in the form of a Social Security number, but it was 000-00-0000, and his last name was and his last name was written in upper and lower case, and just fascinating. So we're in the process
wait a minute,
right now.
Oh. Somebody wrote it in, or was it typed like that?
No, somebody wrote it in.
Okay, that's
hand
what.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've never seen that before. Never seen it, never heard about it. It just blew my mind.
Yeah, what did he put in the letter? Just curious.
Basically, he said, I've taken great pains to record on the land records to correct the records with respect to my political status. And, it's my intention to manage my identity and manage that vessel as a living man, as a non-U.S. citizen, non-taxpayer, et cetera, et cetera. And then he referenced different status correction documentation that he had recorded on the land records, and included some of those, and then swore at the end of it, had it notarized and sent it to them. So he testified to them as to what his actual status was, and demanded that they correct the records to properly reflect that. And he gave them references to the land record recording numbers and the dates and times in which they were recorded on the record, and that was the outcome. They came back and they hand wrote that stuff on the letter to Koskinen. They hand wrote his last name, upper and lower case, and then the 9-digit 000 number.
Okay, but did they acknowledge anything he had said in the letter?
No, that was the only acknowledgement that there was. So right now we're in the process of going through and validating that and getting it, figuring out different ways that we can take that and use it. Yeah. But I mean, right now, for all intents and purposes, so I think about it in terms of things like getting a passport. People have figured out that you don't have to give your Social Security number or give the Social Security number on your passport, on your DS-11 passport application. But they will push you. The post office is conditioned to act as a first form of defense, a bulwark, and you'll get dummies in the post office who will say, well, I can't send this to them. And it's like, yeah, you can. I talked to the State Department, and it's not your job to review the completeness or any aspect of this document. The only thing that you're here for is to witness me signing my signature, or autographing this document, period. So take it, put it in. The supplementary explanatory statement is there to explain exactly what my position is, and that's between me and them, not you. And then it gets to them, and then what usually happens is they'll send a letter, and they'll say, well, you have to give us the Social Security number associated with this particular entity, and then they cite, I think it's 6309E of the Internal Revenue Code, and that doesn't apply to you or me or people that have corrected their status and properly presented themselves. And if you push and you're persistent and you don't need the passport immediately, eventually you will get that. But they'll try everything that they possibly can to trick you and trap you into giving them an excuse so that they can assign that number to that DS-11 application. And one of the things, I don't know if I ever talked to you about this, one of the things that they use, all right, so if you pull down the DS-11 from the State Department's website, it's got 4 pages of instructions and then the 2-page application. And at the top of the instructions, it says, these instructions are not part of the application. But if you read the instructions, which nobody does, you get to page 4 of the instructions, and there's a section marked acts or conditions. And the acts or conditions section has specific instructions to, if any of the following circumstances or facts apply to you, then you have to affirmatively strike them through and then attach a supplementary explanatory statement. And what most people do is they just put those things to the side and they follow the copper moonshine still, or they follow Christopher Gronsky's methods to get their to fill out their passport application. But the State Department has been pushing back and saying, I need your Social Security number. And Pete Hendrickson has some people that have been really good in terms of pushing back against that. We found a way to do it. One of the things that we do is even though the instructions say that the instructions are not part of the application, it's obvious that part, acts or conditions on page 4, absolutely is part of the application. And what happens is, if you don't strike that through, and all you do is attach a supplementary explanatory statement onto the passport application, then you've got a conflict. On the passport application, you're saying, I'm a non-U.S. citizen, and so give me an American, state national passport. And but in that part of the application, you're saying, I am a U.S. citizen. And the way that their system is structured, they will always bias towards including you as a U.S. citizen. And so what we've done is we've found a way to put that page 4 of the instructions with the application as part of the application, so they can't get rid of it. Because I know of people who have actually gone in for face-to-face meetings with the people in the passport office, and they hand the whole package of the DS-11 instructions and application to the person at the window, and the first thing that they do, and they're trained to do this, is they take the first 4 pages of the instructions and they throw them in the garbage. And this guy said, what did you just do? She said, I'll throw them in the garbage. Those aren't part of the application. So get those out of the garbage. Have you ever read page 4? You ever read the acts or conditions? Look at what's there. And then they look kind of sheepish, and then they have to call a supervisor, and then it's like, well, this is going to take a while. And and it's like, hey, you take your time and you do whatever you need to do. Just give me my stuff. And at the end of the process, what you should end up with is we always say, get the passport and the passport card. Now, the passport card is only for travel within the U.S., Mexico, Canada, and the Caribbean. But the thing about the passport card is whereas the passport book does not look any different than a U.S. citizen's passport book, the passport card actually reflects what their records show. And and that's indicated in terms of the number of stars that are on the passport card. And so if you come away, so normally a person who does a DS-11 as a U.S. citizen checks off the U.S. citizen box, they'll get back a passport card with 3 stars. And if you go through this process and are persistent and see it through, you'll get a passport card with 5 stars on it. And I know several people who have gotten pulled over with that, and they don't have a driver's license. And they handed the passport card to either the state trooper or the sheriff or the police officer. And they went back and got onto their computer, and they came back a few minutes later and they handed them the card and they said, sorry to have taken your time. Please, slow down or whatever, drive safely. And to one of my guys who was headed to court, the sheriff asked him, do you need me to give you an escort to the courthouse? And he was like, no, I'm fine. I got plenty of time. But he got a kick out of it.
Wow,
and I had
that's
another one. Yeah.
Let me ask you though, do you have one?
No,
Yet?
not yet.
Not yet.
And
Okay.
there's a separate reason for that, and I'm battling through that. And it's because I'm going through a thing right now with the IRS, and the IRS has been trying for years and years and years and years to get me to file 1040s and all this stuff. And so they have taken to routinely, putting a block on passports. So it's my situation is a little bit more cumbersome, and I'm probably a month or 6 weeks away, because I actually had a couple of guys, and I don't know if anybody on the call has had people from the IRS stop by. I had 2 guys show up to my door one day, and they looked like the lumberjack twins from Saturday Night Live skit. I mean, it was, or Monty Python. I mean, it was, they both had flannel shirts on and down vests and blue jeans. And they're like, we're here from the IRS, and, can you cut me a check? And I just looked at them after I kind of stopped smiling, and I said, well, you realize that I've got a petition where I sued you at the U.S. tax court that's pending right now. And they're like, what? And I said, yeah. I mean, you would know that if you were legitimate and you really know what the heck my file said. And they kind of looked dumb, and then they left, and I've never heard anything from them. So now I'm just in the process of clearing that up. And it's just, right now during the shutdown, nothing's happening, but it's a painstaking process, and you just have to be persistent and work through it. It's making clear to them that you're not a taxpayer, that you're not a U.S. citizen, and giving them the records to show that. And I had done it successfully, and everything was wiped out. And then I think what happens is, the computer kind of spits this stuff back up, and it gets thrown on like the new guy in the office, his desk. And then they say, well, see if you can go get something from this, And so it's a process.
Yeah, I know. There's a question here in the chat. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask it at this point in time, but he is asking, can you see it? Can you ask Bob what his opinion of land patents are?
You know what? I've been working with one of our guys on land patents. And it is not a slam dunk, easy process. Again, like everything that we're doing, okay? The system is designed to frustrate you and to impede your going in and correcting the records with respect to yourself, with respect to your property, with respect to, everything. And so land patents are absolutely legitimate. I know of stories where people have done it. I have never known anybody that was able to do it successfully. Here's what I have seen. I shouldn't say that. I mean, I have seen people who have gone in and recorded letters of patent and traced back the original patent from. I've got a good buddy who's out in New Jersey who's done it and he traced it back all the way from a grant from King George to one of his cousins, and so it can be done, but you have to understand that just going in there and recording it is not like somebody's going to wave a magic wand and it's going to automatically cleanse all of the records. You're going to have to be persistent in enforcing that. And so in my mind, I always kind of I've taken to the same position that Anna does. First thing you've got to do is record on the land records your corrected status so that people know who you are and what you are and what you are not. Because otherwise what you're going to encounter is people who will look at you and you say, well, I'm not a U.S. citizen. And they say, well, where were you born? I say, Chicago. Well, then you're a U.S. citizen. And my response is, you know what? That's your opinion, and you're obviously a U.S. citizen. I'm not, and I really don't have the time to be able to break through and educate you on why that is so. Because everybody has been conditioned to, are you a U.S. citizen? Damn right I am, proudly, that kind of a thing. And it's a problem that we encounter every single day, especially as the government has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So, all you have to do to understand what you're butting up against is look at the federal government shutdown right now. A quarter of the federal government employee base constitutes 800,000 people. So 3.2 million federal employees. And we don't have any idea what 99.9% of those people do. And the place has been shut down for a month, and nobody's life has been in danger, and nobody has really been impacted other than those people who aren't getting checks. And I feel for those people who aren't getting checks, but at the same time, we've got the lowest unemployment rate in history, and those people could have real jobs where they were actually doing things to be productive and benefit society as opposed to just sucking off the teat and doing some, mindless, robotic job. And so that's the kind of thing that we come up against in every one of these different things. So it's one of those things where, like I said, you just have to be persistent in going through this stuff. You have to have patience. When you get the knowledge and you first go in, I just had a situation yesterday with a guy who I was helping, and he called me from the recorder's office, and he said the recorder won't record my status correction documents. And one is, an acknowledgement, acceptance, and deed of reconveyance of the certificate of live birth. One is a certificate of assumed name. One is an act of expatriation from the United States and an oath of allegiance to your birth state. I should say your nativity state, and then a mandatory notice under the FSIA. And the clerk said, "Nah, I can't record this." And he said, "Why?" And they, let me take it to the prosecuting attorney for review. No, he says we can't do this. So then I just jumped on the internet and I was like, okay, here is I sent him an email. I said, here's a link to the Michigan legislature, to the language of the Recording Act that says that the clerk cannot refuse to record any document that meets basically the format requirements of the Act because of its content. So they were directly violating their oath of office, right? Because they were not enforcing the laws and Constitution of the state of Michigan. And so he sent them an email, and he's like, I don't think I'll ever hear back from them. And so he just said, you know what, I want to get this done. He got on the phone and talked to Bill Hewitt down in Lamar County, Georgia. And he said, I'm just going to send it down there. Bill will record it and send it back to me. Every state has a full faith and credit act on the books that says that any recording, judgment, order, et cetera, any public record of any other state or county in the union, that state has an obligation to give it full faith and credit. And so you just send them a notice and say, you know what, okay, you denied me, you know what, here, sit on this. So I'm looking at one question right now, and somebody said, what does it mean to have 4 stars on the passport card? I submitted with Roger Sales' affidavit with the DS-82 renewal. And Roger really, I think, was the pioneer in this stuff. He did some great research and put some awesome stuff together. Okay, what's the significance of 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars? We have, a number of people have done Freedom of Information Act requests to the State Department on numerous occasions and said, what is the significance of the stars on the passport? Now, we know that most people get 3 stars, and 3 stars equates to U.S. citizen, and whatever else, we're not sure. We know 5 stars has a do not detain, do not engage on your NCIC record when they pull it up on the computer. But as far as exactly what it means, because people have hypothesized that it's a what do I say, diplomatic level credential, travel credential, but the reality is we really don't know because they won't tell us. So when they respond to the Freedom of Information Act request, it's always that this information is a national security secret, and so we can't divulge that to you. And which is just like, really? So we keep on hammering and trying to get that information. At the end of the day, I want to know what the truth is, but more important, in most times, I want to know what's effective. And I know that if I myself can get, I know at the end of the process that I'm going through, I will have a 5-star passport and passport card. And the people that I've helped to do the same thing have that. And it's effective. And that's the only thing that I care about. And eventually we will get that information. And I think sooner rather than later, because things are changing. But in the meantime, this is what we have. Somebody else said that DA said it has to be done by a judicial record, not merely a public affidavit. I'm not sure exactly what you're referencing in terms of the public affidavit, but for purposes of what we're doing, we want to get our status correction on the land records. All right. It's very, very important that you correct your political status down to the land and soil, and not to the state of Illinois, not to the state of Michigan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a significant difference. And if you read Anna's things, you'll see that. The importance is that that's where you're going to find that's where you're going to find lawful as opposed to legal. So, the easiest example that comes to my mind when I talk about the difference in terms of the land records and the state of versus Illinois, right? So state of Illinois versus Illinois is the first Constitution of Illinois was adopted in 1818, and the first section of that Constitution had what was the equivalent of a metes and bounds description of Illinois. It went from the Mississippi River on the south, going up in Lake Michigan, at the east and north, and it traced through the boundaries of the state. Now, when they went through in the 1860s, after the established, I want to say it was 1860s or 70s. I'll go back and look. After the Civil War, after Congress adjourned sine die on March 27, 1861, and then they took the, what do I want to say? Basically, they took control, and everything from that point on, we've never had a lawfully seated Congress. They changed the constitutions of the states, and they took those physical descriptions out of there. They took those metes and bounds out of there. And then what you see when you look at the seal and everything else now, it's State of Illinois incorporated in 1871, 1868, whatever it was. I haven't looked at it in a while. And they've done that on every state. And so you start to see those things, and it's one of those kind of things that make you go, right? It's okay. That's significant. Now, let's step back and look at it, and what's the significance of that? It's like who's the guy? Angie. He did research into, I want to say it's Ayers, but it wasn't Ayers. It was maybe Akers, and he did research with respect to food and drug acts across the country, and he found
Alfred Adask.
Yes, Alfred Adask. Yes, brilliant guy. And I was on the phone with him, and he said, "Well, pull up your state's Food and Drug Act." And so I pulled it up, and it's like the Food, Drug, Cosmetic Act. And he said, "Okay, now go down through the definitions and go to the head of that thing." And he said, "Read to me what's the first thing that you come into contact with." And I said, "Well, it says that the terms of this act apply to men and other animals." And I was like, "Oh no, that can't be right. That had to be a typo, right?"
No,
but then,
it's true.
Yeah, and then he was like, "Go out to this state, go out to this state, go out to this state," and it's exactly the same in every single state that you're going to look at, and it just absolutely boggles the mind. And so, those kind of things, those are the aha moments that kind of keep you going and get you to the point where you say, okay, this is momentous stuff that has to be. It substantiates what we do. It substantiates that there are several different tiers of political status and governance structures, and the original organic de jure Constitution and the system of government under the Articles of Confederation never went away. I said to Anna not that long ago, I said they never went away. Essentially, if you wake up and it's a cloudy morning, the sun's still there. It's just masked over by the clouds, but eventually you can cut through it and you can see it. And that's essentially what has happened with our de jure organic republics. They're all there. And what Anna and all of us are doing is trying to reestablish the state jural assemblies, get people to correct their status, reestablish the state jural assemblies, and start to pull together the original republic systems of governance for the 50 individual nation states and reestablish those 19 enumerated government services that we hired the original government services corporations to provide for us, right? And then the rest of the stuff we keep to ourselves, right? 10th Amendment, any powers not granted are specifically retained by the states and by the people. But it's a process, and especially when you look at a federal government that's got 3.2 million employees who are specifically dumbed down and put into information silos so that one doesn't talk to the other, so that nobody gets a full picture of exactly what the situation is. And then multiply that by how many state employees, how many county employees, township employees, how many city employees, village employees, etc. And you start to see the magnitude of the masking that has gone on to keep people from understanding what the situation really is. And so, all I've been doing now for a long time is just working on helping people whose eyes have opened up to navigate through those different systems and correct the records and work to get to a level of knowledge and confidence. It really is confidence where you can navigate that vessel in commerce, because they've taken away the ability for us to operate in international trade. We can only operate in commerce, but we, the physical man, woman, the living soul, can't operate in commerce. They don't recognize us. They only recognize the vessel, and then they look to us as the surety giving life to that vessel. So we need to become the skipper. They're looking at us as Gilligan. So, you look at somebody, I don't know if you've come across this, Angie, but Tracy Ellen Shaw has done a great job in terms of the different capacities of people and operating in commerce. Mm. She took a very, very simplistic approach and said, well, you know what, most states don't do this, but if I go out to Minnesota and I fill out a assumed name certificate and register the assumed name, and I am the owner of it, then and then I put in place a valid power of attorney, and the power of attorney that she recommends is what I would do, which is it's actually was drafted by attorneys years and years and years ago, and is very explicit and clear, and covers all aspects of anything that you would need to do in your life. And she had a woman that went into the hospital. Her daughter had gotten very, very sick, and she had, just massive hospital bills. I think she was in the hospital for like 7 months. And at one point, one of the administrators in the hospital called her in and said, we're going to have to deal with some of these bills. And she went in and she said, well, I am the attorney, in fact, for the principal. And the principal is the name, all right, that you've got there on my daughter's records, that vessel. And the woman looked at her and, kind of raised an eyebrow, but the woman knew what she was talking about, or at least understood where she was coming from. And she said, I understand where you're going, and why don't we do this? And so they did this short-term thing that took care of whatever it was so that the treatment could continue. And then at the end of the process, the woman called her in and she said, you're going to have to go to this woman at the State Department of Health and Human Services and work through, because the preliminary temporary fix that we put into place to take care of the bills up until that point in time, we've gone over the maximum for that, and so this stuff has to be taken care of. And so she said, call this lady, and so she did. And she talked to the woman, and she said the same thing. I am the attorney, in fact, for the principal. I'm operating under a durable power of attorney, and I'm here to take care of this matter with respect to my principal. I'm not the surety, and my daughter is not the surety. And at the end of the conversation, the woman said, do you want to do this for all of your children as well? And she said, absolutely. And so in the mail, a couple of weeks later, they got a bill, zero due, and they got a card from the state that had the state's health insurance and whatever the highest level of health insurance coverage there was. They got a card that reflected that status for them. So it's a matter, she's the skipper. Okay, and she made it very clear on forms that were really, really understandable to them and clear, as opposed to going in and beating your chest and yelling and screaming because people don't understand you because you're speaking a different language, you know?
I need to do that for my son.
Yeah, I mean, it's, but I'll send you a link.
Okay.
I'll send you a link to a great, I'll put it up in the chat. It's a great, it's how to operate in commerce using multiple capacities.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's a very, very succinct, easy to understand explanation of different
capacities.
Yeah. And how do you be the skipper,
Yeah. Let's see here on the chat. You see what it says there?
Let's see, I'm scrolling through right now.
Right under where you put the link, it says which type of POA is being used.
If you go out to that link, you can walk through that and you'll see everything.
Very good. I have 13 pages. I'm saving this. Thank you very much. And okay. How to operate in commerce using multiple capacities. I like it.
Yeah,
I'll have to read that.
yeah. I mean, it's very clear. It's very simple, very clear. It's just getting the records to properly reflect who you are, and excuse me, and doing it in a way where you're not battling with people, and that's the hardest thing, because it was interesting, because the guy who I was helping through the whole recording issue in Michigan, and what he said, and he's a 70-year-old guy, okay, but he's really, really sharp, and he's taken the time to learn, and he, I was really, really proud of him, because he was like, I wasn't going to let her get away with that, and so he sent the email and just said, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like you're violating your oath of office to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and of America, and state of Michigan and the laws thereof, because the Recorders Act specifically says that you can't refuse to record something like I presented you yesterday because of its content. And I know he'll never hear back from them, but to me, I was talking to him today. I said it was important that you did that. It was as important for you in terms of giving you content, because you know what the truth is now, as it was for that woman and the prosecuting attorney who she's going to forward it to, or I think he copied them on it, who's going to look at the law and realize that, okay, what they're doing is a direct violation of the law. And so it is a violation of their oath of office. And whether that ever comes back to bite them in the behind, ultimately that's not that's not, it's not for me to care about. What's important to me is that you throw it in their face in a way that they can't avoid it. Because the truth, once they see it and they can't avoid it, is going to change them little by little. And that's, to me, is the only important thing. I mean, at the end of the day, this system, I think, has a limited shelf life. And, I don't think it's going to be around that much longer. But in the meantime, we have to deal with it. And so, a lot of my time is spent finding alternative paths when people butt up against some level of bureaucracy that blocks their ability to do what is their lawful right, to declare and stand on and walk in their proper capacity, So that's what I've been doing, Angie.
You've been busy.
Mm.
Sounds like it anyway.
It's been good. I mean, the levels of information and the speed with which information has been coming in, it has picked up significantly, and so it's been really good. I'm happy.
Would you like to take a call, a question?
Yeah, I'm seeing a hand raised, but I can't see what the question is.
Well, there's no question yet. Let me unmute him,
okay.
and then he can ask it. Go ahead, 812. You've been unmuted.
Good evening.
Oh, good evening.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I came in kind of late on the call. I was trying to decide what call to get on tonight, Andrew. I decided to jump on yours. I'm kind of glad I did.
Me
thanks
too.
For all the information. Thanks for the information on the DBA. I have a registered DBA in Indiana, and I have a trade name they call in Colorado. And
okay.
I learned about the DBA back in early 2016, and I applied it. I went through the Minnesota Secretary of State, filed there first, and then I filed, according to the Indiana statutes, I filed with the county recorder. And because I have a power of attorney over all of my son's legal matters, whom happens to be wrongfully incarcerated in Indiana, I thought this would for sure be a way to get him out, to claim that I have authority over the name, and I do not wish this man to. No, I said something about you have a live man in your prison, and here is the all capital name. I forget how I worded it. I sent a fax to the prison warden and was ignored for almost a month. And then finally got to talk with an assistant warden, and he told me they weren't going to honor the POA nor the DBA, that I have to get a court order. So I took the DBA paperwork and hand deliver it to the sheriff, to the judge, and to the prosecutor. And when I handed it to the judge, oh my gosh, he started reading, and his face went white. And he just threw it off on his desk. He says, "There's nothing I can do about this." And I said, "Well, I'm hoping you'll reconsider once I've gone. Have a good day." And the prosecutor, he just looked it over and flipped on desk, didn't say nothing, and the sheriff wasn't in. I had to be with the deputy. Well, what would a person do in a matter like that? I've since been learning about going in and filing a criminal complaint using the U.S. codes. And I've been trying other strategies I've learned since.
Sure. I mean, people have gone in with that kind of a foundation and filed writs of habeas corpus. I'm trying to remember, Sam, Angie, at one point years ago, I think it was Winston that got picked up. They were trying to intimidate him, and Sam went in with a UCC and a writ of habeas corpus and said, I'm here, went to the U.S. Marshals and said, I'm here to collect my property. And they looked at it, and they came back. They said, excuse me for a second. They went back, behind closed doors, and they came back a while later, and they said, well, what are you going to do with him? And he said, well, I'm going to let him go. And they're like, oh, well, then we can't do this. And then they were talking about it afterwards, and he realized if he had said, well, I'm going to take him home, and I'm going to feed him, and I'm going to clothe him, and I'm going to house him, and I'm going to put him to work. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well then, they'll give him to you. And he realized that after the fact. So it was, just another one of those things where you just kind of say, okay, it can work. The problem is that you're always in this you're in this constant state of experimentation, right? And so to me, the most important thing is educate yourself to the highest level that you possibly can, and so that you get to the point where you're not intimidated and you go in peacefully. Okay, so one of the things that my buddy did down in with respect to that EFAX that I told you about at the beginning to Koskinen, one of the aspects of that affidavit that he sent to Koskinen was an explicit and detailed statement that under Title 50 of the U.S. Code that he's not an enemy combatant, that he is not a belligerent under the Trading with the Enemy Act or the War and Emergency Powers Act, and that he lives peacefully with all men and asks to be treated that way. Because it was interesting, what we found as Anna people just come out of the woodwork with things that are just pierced through years and years of fog. And she had a general tell her at one point, we use Title 50. Every time that you're sitting there in a situation like the woman was talking about, with respect to your son, okay? Title 50 of the U.S. Code, all right, specifically the Trading with the Enemy Act, is what they use to treat you, all right? They put you in that status as an enemy combatant, as a belligerent, and then they can do whatever they want to you, right? Because they've got carte blanche, because you're an enemy of the state. And that was something that they did in the War and Emergency Powers Act in the 30s when they made those, and this is right around that March to June time frame when FDR was doing all of his executive orders after that one bankruptcy in the Depression, where they made changes to the War and Emergency Powers Act, and what they did was they took it from citizens of the United States of America, the original organic de jure government, citizens of the original states, all of a sudden were transmuted into enemies of the state. And if you go back and you look at the way, the language that they use, so going back to the stuff that Alfred Adask and Roger Ayers pound, what they did was they made the change to make everyone United States citizens, and all U.S. citizens were deemed to be enemies of the state. But they didn't reference specifically the Trading with the Enemy Act. All they said was that act of October 7th or whatever of 1917. And so you have to sit there and go back and dig through and figure out, what do you mean that act? Well, that was the Trading with the Enemy Act. And they made that one simple change, and everybody became the enemy. And then they put together the Council of Governors, and all the governors were basically threatened. You put up all the life and property and energy of all the people of each of your states to cover the national debt, and then you get it so that the national debt can never be challenged, et cetera, right? And then here we are. So it's critical that what you do is you get yourself in a position where you make it very clear for the record on as many levels as you possibly can that you're coming forward as a non-belligerent, not as an enemy of the state, which is rebutting their presumption, and then showing them that you have corrected your status and that you're standing on the land and soil, that you're not a corporation, you're not a corporate employee, et cetera, and they're, and so treat me accordingly and give me the ability to be able to go forward and travel, et cetera, without encumbrance. And there are people that are doing it, and it's happening little by little. It's never fast enough, but I've been looking at this stuff for 25 years, and I have to say that the things that have happened in the last year and even the last 6 or 8 months, things are accelerating, and knowledge is expanding out into the base of the people across the nation, and people are learning quickly, and more information is being made available. So you just have to, like I said, you have to be persistent, you have to be patient, and you're going to get to where you want to be.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I have persevered, and I'm feeling like I'm almost at the end of the road now with a strategy I won't go into that I'm working on right now. But I did. You brought up about the clerk refusing to, the recorder refusing to record. Mm-hmm. And I also studied much of Carl Lintz's work, and I decided, well, I'll try this. Like you said, one thing don't work and you meet with resistance, maybe there's another way, and I found Carl Lintz's work, and I got my paperwork down to 4 lines. I had to edit it about 17 times. But anyway, I got it down to where, I get it down to where Carl thought it was good to go. So I filed it with a common law lien because what I was doing with the recorder, and we had talked over the phone. I told her I have something to mail to put in miscellaneous because there's another county that under miscellaneous, they do have a common law lien. But in this particular mm-hmm. county, they didn't have that category, but I didn't know it till after. But anyway, she and the county attorney, whom she referred me to after I got her, I got the money order back, the return receipt, all of that I got back. But the common law lien was a handwritten note from my son, dated and thumbprinted in black, of course, because he's in prison. I don't have anything else. And that I have a lien on him for $1 million. He's my $1 million one of my $1 million babies. So she wouldn't. I had a picture of him. I had that. He's known to be at this correctional facility, and I want to see him in 72 hours. I forget how it worked. 72 hours, and she refused to record it. And the county attorney she referred me, she told me what he said, and then he confirmed it in an email. Big mistake on his part, but anyway, he's on the to-do list. But sometime down the road, maybe. It said that because it didn't meet statutory code, and I was like, oh dear, did they make a big boo-boo? And I even told the commissioner about it. I had to make some reports to the commissioner because that particular county I'm having a lot of conflict with. Perseverance is a good thing. Don't give up. Take it slow and easy and learn as you go, kind of thing, But anyway, thanks for the call.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
It's interesting, Angie, because in what I found was when I had gone down to Cook County, which is the county that Chicago resides in, we call it Crook County, they stopped. They refused to record things that they used to routinely allow, and I have things that were on there for years and years and years. Back 2000, 10, 15 years ago, and just like the one was just talking about in miscellaneous file, etc. In 2015, they actually went to the legislature and they amended the Illinois Recorders Act, and they took away the miscellaneous recording for counties in Illinois that had over like 3 million people, and there's only one. That's Cook County. And what happened basically is they severely restricted the documents that they would record because people were waking up and they were coming in and recording these things. So they just stopped it. And so now, if you want to record things in Cook County related to correcting your status, et cetera, they won't let you do it. They put it into, legal review, and it just goes into a black hole and you never see it again. Or they just reject it outright because they've actually amended the law. But in other places, they just ignore it.
Boy, it's amazing. So, okay, let's see who else is up. We have another hand up. 407. You've been unmuted. Go ahead, 407.
Hey, thanks for letting me in.
There you go.
Thanks for letting me in, Angela.
Oh, you're welcome.
I enjoy your guest, and I'm happy to hear he refers to Roger Sales. It makes me quite happy.
Okay.
I wanted to mention that Anna has a mandatory judicial notice.
Right.
That I've used with the IRS, and it seems that once they get those, you never hear from them again. And I was wondering the guest thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of the people that worked with the team to develop that, and it's a mandatory notice and notice of liability under the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, and I've sent that to them, and like I said, with me it's really weird because I send them things and then they just go away, and then all of a sudden, a year or two will go by, and then like I can only liken it to it falls on like the new guy in the office's desk, and they say, well, you try and go get something out of this, and so I'm like, okay, let's go through the dance now. Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? And I think that's a very powerful document. It took us a while to whip it into shape because there are constructs there that are, you look at them and you have to wrap your head around the fact that once you correct your status, that you are foreign to the United States. And when I say foreign to the United States, obviously, you're thinking about things like territorial and municipal United States. So, the District of Columbia Municipal Corporation in the territorial United States that was formed, which are corporations, and you are standing on the land in one of the original de jure republic states, right? So nation states, and so you are foreign to that, and so as such you operate under foreign sovereign immunity, but you need to give them notice of that. And you also, in that document, it also includes a notice of liability, and under 18 U.S.C. for them if they violate your immunity, and you need to, when they get that, then they start to understand. It's just like everything else with the IRS. So the first thing that you do is you look at anything that they, okay, you're operating under 26 U.S. Code. You sent this notice, you sent this letter demanding things, whatever. You didn't sign it under penalties of perjury. Your rules require that everything that you send out related to this particular person, this name, this vessel, that and everybody looks at it from the perspective of looking in the mirror. That applies to me. Anything I send them has to be sworn under penalties of perjury. They're their rules. They're government employees. That's who they apply to. They're the ones who have to swear under penalty of perjury, and they never do. It's just like court clerks. Federal rules require that anything that's issued out of the federal court clerk's office, a summons, an eviction notice, a foreclosure notice, a sheriff's sale, et cetera, all marshal sale, all those things have to be that the clerk has to sign them and stamp them, physically stamp them, and they never do it anymore. Very rarely. I shouldn't say never, but because I've seen some recently where they did. But for the critical things, especially where they're taking people's properties away, they don't sign it. The clerk doesn't sign it, and the clerk doesn't stamp it as the federal rule is required, because to do so is taking on liability for that taking. And so you need to throw it in their face, and you need to let them know. And so that Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act mandatory notice is very, very useful for those purposes. You throw it in their face and you say, okay, look it, you didn't sign this under penalties of perjury. You have, I am a foreign sovereign, and you violated my immunity, and you are liable under 18 U.S.C. These are the sections of the code that apply to you. Now, since you're acting outside of your oath and your employment, the scope of your employment, do you understand that you are personally liable for this? And that's
right.
where you start to see those kind of things where they, because the last thing in the world that they want to do is they just want to go after the easy low-hanging fruit, right? So they, the last thing in the world that they want to do is have to take on personal liability for that stuff.
Right, and the penalties of perjury also forces them to admit that they are a witness with firsthand knowledge, and that's why they never sign anything, because they cannot be a witness with firsthand knowledge, and that's what they have to attest to, and they can't do it.
Yeah, they don't have a factual basis.
Well, thank you. I'm enjoying the call, Angela. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good luck.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying the call. Let's see here. Was that 407? I think it was.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You muted yourself. Let me just put your little hand down. And 817, that was from before, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question? Press star 2. And that'll put your hand up. I don't know if you've checked out the chat at all.
I just pulled it up. Yeah.
Okay, we got 2 more hands just went up also. Let's see here. First up, 928. You've been unmuted.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just wonder if there's a email location where I could write you, Bob, and ask a question, maybe get some information.
Oh yeah, I'll put it in the chat. Absolutely. And
The chat. How do you get to the chat?
Oh, you have to get online. But here, I'll give it to you as well.
Okay.
Do you have a pen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it's all one word. It's debt lawyer, DEBTLAWYER, debtlawyer @gmail.com.
Okay, that's simple. All right. I've been emailing Anna about some things, and I'd just like to get your opinion on something too. So.
Sure. Yeah, I go back and forth with Anna all week long on different things.
Yeah, she's pretty busy.
Oh God, she's.
Yeah,
I tell you what.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just so you know, it's a felony weapons charge. It's just stupid as can be. But I went to the sheriff and had him run the ID, see if it's all right for me to own a gun again because of a felony DUI I had. And
Mhm.
he come back, oh yeah, it's okay. So here I've been packing a pistol for 3 years, and then I get busted. Oh, you're a felon, you can't have that. And now I'm facing 3.5 years in prison for it. So,
Oh my God.
and almost $250,000 in fines and whatever. I'm sitting there going, what? And it's all because the sheriff lied to me.
Uh-huh.
You know, I don't know why they did that. Well, sheriff deputy or whoever. Anyway, I'll send you an email there.
What state are you in?
I'm in Arizona.
Huh. I thought it was legal to carry in Arizona. Open carry.
Well, it is, but see, in 2007, I had a felony DUI. And I waited for 7 years, and I didn't know there was some kind of a form you got to go through all this stuff to try and get your rights back. I didn't know that. I just found that out just recently when I got arrested. I'm like, what? So the sheriff's deputy told me, yeah, you're okay. You can go by. I said, all right, cool. When it was after the 7 years was over, I just said, okay, I'll go in and check it out.
So let me ask you
told
this.
Me about that.
Let me ask you, where
Yes.
did you get the gun? Did you buy it from a private party or from a store?
No, it was private party.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, if a store issued it to you, then you had all the right to keep it, But anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all that. I yield. I'm happy. I'm listening in. I'm enjoying this. I'll call in again.
Well, good. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. Go ahead, Bob.
You know what? It just goes to underscore. You ever get in a situation like that, especially a situation like you're talking about, you got to get that in writing. Because otherwise you're just cannon fodder. They don't care.
Yeah. This is Nate in Central Arizona. Just so you know, in case I call back in again. So.
Okay, great. Nate. Thank you. Keep us
Nate.
updated on what happens.
All right, I will. Thank you. I yield.
You. Okay. Next up is 817. You've been unmuted. 81726. Oh, 817-726.
Yeah, this is John in Texas.
Hi, John.
Things I want to ask. How are you? There's two things I want to ask you. When an attorney signs his signature like just an E, and that's it, instead of his written name, can a person go on that person's signature signing is like that E? Do you know what I mean by his signature is like just a single E written? And how do you prove that? Okay, he signed an affidavit, and it was just like an E. That's all it is, not his full name on it.
Right. So that's his mark. I mean, you can do an X if that's what you want. It's always been acceptable. That's not a problem. But what you end up in is a situation, John, where you have to then, if you're going to go and challenge that or use it in whatever capacity or situation against him or in support of you or whatever, then what you'd have to do is just go into court records or other public records and find other instances where he's signed documents using that and just show them as exemplars of this is how he identifies himself with respect to public records and other documents that he signs. So that's the guy. Somebody just put up in the chat that E is the electronic signature, but it's not. S is the electronic signature, and in brackets. So if he's just writing in, an E as his, what's his first name?
Christopher.
Yeah, I don't know where. I mean, you'd have to look at where the E comes from, but I mean, you're able to use whatever mark that you want. So people that couldn't read or write, right? The illiterates, which until recent history they were many in this country. You'd see the old westerns and the old pioneer movies, and people would come forward, or the old pirate movies, and people would come forward and say, you know what, sign your name here, and they'd say, well, I can't write. Say, okay, well, make your mark, and they'd put an X or whatever else, and that was, they put that next to the name of the guy who signed up for the Army, or they signed up for the Navy or whatever. And so you've got the ability to do that. But if you're going to challenge that in any way, then you need to find other examples where that person has used that in case they deny that, so that you can show that, this is legitimate, this is what this guy did, he has to stand on it.
Okay. Second thing I want to ask you is, I've been doing land tax since 1975 and did not realize it. I'm an oil and gas landman as a real estate broker also. Okay, an oil and gas landman, I don't know if you know what that is. They run titles. Yeah, they go out and lease land for oil and gas for oil companies. Now in Texas,
for mineral rights and stuff like that, sure. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, what I do, I go from patent to present.
Okay.
That's what you do in oil and gas. Okay, I didn't realize this, but it's the same thing as a land patent. But what I'm doing now is going back, and each one of those documents, I have to certify them. Then I make a list on them. And then I go post it for 61 days in a public place. You have to go back every week. You may have to get a newspaper that has a picture of something on there to show the date of it, because people will remove those from
all
the
the time.
public place. So if
you
don't have anybody that objects to it, now I'm talking about people that has an interest in the land, not somebody just coming out of the woodwork and say, well, I'm going to object to it. You don't even have to answer them. Just people that have an interest in the land that they believe, then you approach that. Then after 61 days, you sign some documents, and then you record it. Okay. In my situation, I've gone to county clerks, and they have destroyed the documents and my check and sent it back to me on recording. It's like 10 days later when I thought it was recorded. And that's a problem, especially when you thought and believe they were. As a court case, I think it's in 1990. It just happens to be in Texas, that if you take it down there and to record it, and they don't record it, you can go back on them, the time that you were in there, mainly the date that you can support that, then they're recorded. And I don't know that court case. I don't remember it. But my question on that is, what if they destroy it and send it back to you? I had a birth certificate also that I sent, and then they destroyed it, sent it back. And I asked them, I said, give me another birth certificate, and they wouldn't do it. They said it's
Really?
$23 if I want another one. Yes.
Oh,
I've been around the block. I've been around the block on a lot of these deeds, royalties, minerals, like that.
Sue them for destroying your property. Jesus, go to small claims court or whatever. Put a price on them, what they took.
You look at that instrument, all right, that instrument has value. And so you look at it, and you look at the number on it. So at the top of the thing, it's got a file number, right, that the state assigns to it. But then there's a certificate number that's specific to that particular piece of paper, that particular piece of bond paper. And it's from the U.S. bond company. And that thing has a value. Now, they make it very, very hard for us to figure out what that value is. People have speculated on different things and claim that they found evidence of each Social Security card has a value of $3.5 billion assigned to it. I've never been able to substantiate that, but I've heard it more than once. Each birth certificate is worth so many billions of dollars. And that goes back to what we were talking about before in terms of what happened when the Council of Governors in 1933 got knuckled under by FDR. And each governor pledged the full faith and credit and all life and property to the the national debt. It goes back to that. So, they're trading on this stuff. They're instruments, and so it's got a value. Who's to say that you can't claim on that value when they destroy it?
Right.
So, but it's
Last
interesting what you're saying in terms of doing it with respect to oil and gas and mineral rights and leasing rights and things like that, because yeah, I mean, you've seen it from a very, very everyday practical perspective, but the reality is that it's there for everybody to use once you get into your proper capacity. And then the biggest challenge is obviously they want to continuously try and default you back into a capacity that benefits them. And you need to be able to rebut that.
Well, I appreciate you answering the question. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for your input. I appreciate it.
Something happened while I was on. Yeah, I lost everything went off. So I went back to the talk show and it started recording again. It says it's recording 1 minute. Wait a minute. Is that right? Oh, no, it's already been an hour and 40. Okay, it's okay. It just picked up where it left
Yeah.
off. I thought I lost what I was recording, but anyway, okay. Jeez.
Well, and it's
Scary.
interesting, Eddie, what that guy was just talking about. I remember so if you go into the old county building in downtown Chicago in Cook County, and I don't remember, I think it's in the basement by the old recorder's office where they have these Torrens files and all this other stuff, where they have the big books with the land records and stuff like that. And tucked in the back in an unlit corner, there's a bulletin board. And it's sitting on the wall, and there's all these pieces of paper and documents that are pinned to it, thumbtacked to it. And you go up there, and it's all these notices. And it's notices regarding court proceedings and all sorts of other things. And it's exactly what that gentleman was just talking about. People going out and putting on the public record. And especially now when we're in an age of, cameras all the time with cell phones, you go down there and you tack the thing up there, and that's your public notice. All right. People say you have to publish it, in a paper in general circulation, but no, you need to do public notice, and that is public notice. But you have to substantiate it. So you go down there, like the gentleman said, you go down there every week, and you put up a copy of the day's newspaper, and you take a picture of the notice that you put on the bulletin board, and you're probably going to have to replace it a number of times because the thing some people just take it off maliciously. Sometimes it just gets so overcrowded that they pull it off and they put it on you to go down and make sure that the notice stays. And you do that for 4 or 6 weeks, and it has the same practical effect of publishing in a publication of general circulation. And you just take a picture of the notice that you have and that day's newspaper, and you do that 4, 5, 6 times over the course of a month and a half. And then you've got the basis for your having given public notice. If anybody challenges you, then you've got that record that you can use.
Very good, very good. Okay, who's up next? Let's see. Okay, that's it. Nobody else has their hand up at the moment. It's just you and me,
cool.
Ken.
I hope this is good.
Oh yeah, very good. I've enjoyed listening to it. It's been enlightening. He says check the chat. Down the middle is saying check the chat. Well, maybe that's not for you. I hope that.
Oh, the 5.
Okay, somebody.
JR is asking about what are the 5 notices. So if you look at Anna's things, okay, it's not necessarily the 5 instruments that we boil down to record with respect to correcting your status. There's an acknowledgement, acceptance, and deed of reconveyance with respect to the certificate of live birth. All right, so that deals with that instrument with respect to your birth estate. And then there's an act of expatriation and oath of allegiance that takes you out of the United States and puts you back on the land and soil, along with the acknowledgement, acceptance, and deed of reconveyance. So the deed of reconveyance actually takes you from living in the United States to living on the land and soil. And then you express your political status with respect to an act of expatriation from the United States, that corporate entity that they've put you in by virtue of the 14th Amendment and a million other silent contracts that George Mercer talked about. And then you've got an assumed name certificate. Now, preferably, what you're going to do is you're going to go back to the session laws on assumed name for your birth state, and that's where you're going to start. And you're going to give notice that that is your name, all right, that they put on that certificate that they registered anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks after your nativity. And you're going to take control of that because you are the heir and you have come back, right? And when the heir comes back, the estates revest. And then you're going to, let's see this, so there's 3. Then you're going to send the FSIA, the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, mandatory notice, and I'm missing one. But these are things that Anna has talked about continuously. And you know what? I mean, I've got them. We give them away. We give templates and instructions and things like that away for free for people that want to correct their political status. So just email me. I'll put my email there again, and just email me, and I'll be happy to send that to anybody. They should be able to walk through that if it's something else and they need more, if they need more, in terms of time and kind of hold people's hands. We do that a lot, hold people's hands. But for those we ask for a reasonable donation just to help us keep the lights on and keep going.
Down the middle is asking, is there somewhere we can get more info on the 5 documents?
Yeah, that's what I was just talking about.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yes.
Sorry.
You go out. You just go out to AnnaVonRights.com, or look up Anna Von Reitz, REITZ. Anna has she's incredibly prolific, and she writes. I don't even know how she does it. I don't know how she's got the time to do what she's doing, especially after the earthquake and all.
I know. I get email after email from her, and they're these lengthy, expletives. Unbelievable.
Oh,
she's amazing.
Yeah. She's so prolific. It just boggles my mind, and the level of and I just love how incredibly simple she makes these things, so that even if you just walked in the door and started looking at the stuff, and this is just completely foreign language, she makes it understandable. So if you go out to her blog, I just typed it into the chat, and you go out and look at it. There's hundreds of documents, but there's some where she just talks about the those documents specifically. Or like I said, if you email me, I can send them to you, and you can just we put them together with educational modules that explain everything and walks you through step by step with templates that you can pull up, and then they're just John Doe, Jane Doe templates that you put in there. It's a little bit more complex for women, particularly married or divorced women, just because you've got more names. So you have to work through that. You may have to do multiple documents with like the certificate of assumed name and things like that. But it can be done.
We have another hand up, but I wanted to mention to you that we had Candy Lee on one night. Have you spoken to her?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
I mean, she has dropped off the planet. I get so many emails from people trying to get a hold of her, and she doesn't respond. So I guess she doesn't want to be bothered. I don't know.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And what was she talking about?
All of Anna's paperwork.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, we've got it. And you know what? There is a I'll put up another website as well that that deals with her stuff. Somebody put a nice little website up that has all of the documents up there. And let's see here. Okay, here.
That would be great. Something that has more help. I feel bad. She must have got bombarded. I know what that's like, but
Yeah.
you can't come on the call and lay out all this information and then drop off the face of the earth. It's because all these people
No.
have questions and want to have a need to know. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm sorry
Especially
that
this stuff, because it's not just intuitive. Yeah.
no, you need to ask questions and know what you're doing. Help. People need to point people in the right direction. That's what
Yeah.
I would say.
No, happy to do it.
Okay, good. Uh, okay. 475. You've been unmuted. 475. You have a lot of air wind going on. Oh, wait, that's James 262. You've been unmuted. Okay, James, I had to mute you out because you got too much noise going on in the background. 475, you've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
I had a question regarding when you get a judgment that wasn't signed properly or stamped and stuff like that. How can you respond to that?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Oh, sorry. What I mean is what would your response be when you get a judgment and they don't do the proper steps, meaning signing it, stamping it, whatever? You made a comment regarding that a little earlier. I forgot exactly.
Okay, so we've been looking at it from the federal perspective, and the federal and trying to trace it through the different down to the county level. I know on the federal level, anything that is issued, any process that's issued, any documents that are issued out of the court clerk's office, judgments, orders, whatever, notices, summons, they all have to be signed by the clerk and they have to be stamped with the clerk's seal. Now, whether or not that applies to each individual county, since they're all federal anyway, is a question that I'm running through right now. But the easy, and quick answer to your question is you challenge it, and you challenge it as improper and as invalid because somebody has to take personal responsibility and liability for that judgment order, and if somebody didn't, then the order should be void. The judgment should be void. But something that you're going to have to affirmatively challenge that for its deficiencies.
Okay. So basically, do the research with the county to see what they have on the books regarding the judgments, how they're supposed to be filed.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, you just need you need to look at that for your individual location. I know it for the federal. That's definitely, there's no question there. And it's just a question of trying to having to enforce it. And that's, what anybody that's walking down this path has to understand is that you correct the records and you do all the steps that you need to do to make sure that you have this stuff done correctly. And that's the first part. And then after that, and that can be hard enough in and of itself, wrapping your head around things like, your name and the person and the vessel and your capacity, and all of that. And then what you have to do is you need to navigate that vessel. You need to enforce claims. You need to, enforce the establishment of and the recognition of your capacity, your proper capacity, when it's challenged. And everyone needs to do that. And there's no shortcuts. You just, it's the good thing is that for people that are coming into it now, or have come into it recently, it's gotten a lot simpler and a lot easier to understand, because the volume of information that's out there and the quality of the information that's out there and the clarity of it has made it much, much easier for people to pick up and read and understand and look around in their own lives and see graphic examples of what Anna, for example, writes about with respect to capacity and identity management and things like that, how it's true and how it applies to their lives.
Yeah, so if you wanted to enforce it, I guess you would just study some of her stuff, because that's
yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Right. And one comment that I had, because I heard some people talking about being able to record documents. I'm not sure if this is correct or not, but I heard some people, what they do is just go to the next county over, the next state over, or there's like some people, go to different states and record their documents, and then if it's recorded somewhere else, it pretty much holds for, or they could come back and record it where they're at after they record it somewhere else.
Well, yes, no, you're absolutely right, and I had spoken about this early on in the call. So essentially, for people that can't record things in Cook County because they changed the Recorders Act with respect to the county, then they can go to Kane County or Will County. DuPage County can be a little bit goofy, and usually they will record that. But if you can't find some place, and you don't have the ability to travel to the next state, then research Lamar County, Georgia, LAMAR, Lamar County, Georgia. Bill Hewitt down in Lamar County will record things, and then you take a certified copy of that and you send it with a notice to your birth county, and you say, okay, here's the deal. On such and such date, you refuse to record a valid instrument and supporting documentation related to my family estate, and in violation of your oath of office and the laws and the Constitution of the state that you work for. And so I was forced to take it to another jurisdiction and have it recorded. Please take notice that, these documents were recorded on Lamar County, on Kane County, on Will County, whatever, on such and such a date, and you are required to take give full faith and credit to these public records pursuant to the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of whatever the state is, and your oath of office. And then you just leave it at that. Throw it in their face, and let them sit there and and chew on it, because at first they're going to sit there and say, well, what is this person talking about? And I don't have to do anything because I work for the government. And then eventually they're going to look at it and they're going to realize that full faith and credit is a real thing, and I'm demanding that you apply it, and you really don't have a choice.
Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty much what I wanted to discuss. Thank you. I appreciate your
Sure. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you for coming on. Okay, let's see. Next up is James 262. Hopefully you got rid of that noise. You've been unmuted. Hey, James.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Thank you.
My question is this: for the people that in Cook County, in Kane County, Geneva, Illinois, they record everything. They rarely ask any questions about recording. Okay. But my question is this: I'm a truck driver, and right now we are getting killed with all these regulations and all of these things that are going on right now as far as truck drivers, to where a lot of the old truck drivers are getting out of the business because of all these regulations and rules and all these things. Every year it seems like it's just not every year, it means sometimes every month something new that that's coming up. What is it that we can do as far as trying to get out of this type of business that they're doing?
To get out of all the requirements that they're imposing upon you?
Yeah.
Well, same kind of a thing. Now, when you're talking about CCLs and stuff like that, I think it's probably tougher. The one thing, and here's the problem. All right, the problem it's like going to, if you're working for a corporation and you realize exactly what your status is with respect to imposition of the income tax and whether or not it applies to you. Same thing with respect to the requirements that they're imposing upon you with the CCL. It's a commercial relationship. You're operating in commerce. When you're operating in commerce as a person, then they have the ability to be able to put whatever requirements that they want to on the contractual relationship that you have with that government services corporation. And that's where they get their power, and that's where they get their money. So I don't know if there is a way, and maybe somebody on the call has dealt with this. The easy way to look at it is to say, okay, well, if you correct your status and you get evidence of that with respect to something like the passport card, you should be able to avoid those things. But the problem is that you're going to have a really hard time finding somebody that's going to hire you, because they're so brainwashed. It's like the HR people in these corporations, they're so intimidated, they're not going to challenge the IRS. So if the IRS sends a lock-in letter that you can only do 0 or 1 exemptions, or you have to do 19 exemptions, whatever, the people in HR and that are doing payroll, they're not going to challenge that, because it's they don't want to get into a beef with the IRS and then have even more problems. And so the same thing holds true with once you sign on to a commercial operator's license, at that point you have given over a lot of control to them. But there has to be a way to do it. It's establishing correcting the records with respect to the status is simple as far as that stuff goes. Actually, again, enforcing it in those particular relationships, that's where you get into, that's where you challenge and you get into, issues. And I haven't seen anybody honestly, I've never seen anybody that's challenged that. So I wish I had a quick and easy answer for you. Theoretically, doing the passport should help you to take control of and the status correction documents that underlie the passport as an American should give you the ability to be able to travel. But the problem is once you're operating in commerce on the highways, then that's the king's highways, and they can impose whatever restrictions on you that they want to and treat you the way that they want to.
Are you saying there's the king's highways, but are we free to travel on the highways?
I'm sorry, you broke up there. I couldn't understand you, James.
Are you saying it's the king's highways, but aren't we free to travel on the highways without having all these rules and regulations imposed up on us?
Well, yeah, but again, okay, so you're making your living doing this, and this is the system that they set up, and they did it specifically to deal with situations like this, to try and keep you in the pen, right? So So you're out there, and so yes, you have the right to travel. But once you start making, so you have the right to travel for your personal enjoyment or whatever, freely, anywhere that you want to go. The problem is that once you start operating and for profit, doing cartage or whatever in the state and the county or across the country, then at that point you're at a different level. And at that point you really, man, I've never had to deal with that situation, James. I would have to look at it and see if there's a way to do that. And I know that there is a way to do that. Here's the problem. The problem is, let's say you successfully do it, and you correctly establish your status, and you have the ability to be able to back that up. Can you find clients that will hire you? And if you just, for example, if you don't have a CCL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that would be, because all these companies that's what they're looking at, your CDL. Even though if you're an independent operator, still looking for that, to have that CDL to show that you're operating with that license.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's not even, it goes beyond that. When you go to a truck stop to tank up, right, and get diesel, all right, I've seen places where they say, okay, I need your CCL, and they hold it while you're filling up the truck, and they make a record of it. Now, why in the world? And I saw one driver who just said, I'm not going to give you that. Here's my credit card. I'm buying some diesel, and that's that. So, it's just, we're getting into, the system it's ready to collapse, but in the meantime, they're passing more and more rules and regulations and laws, et cetera, to restrict. And these corporations, which are eventually we're just going to have one big corporation that owns everything. And right now we got a bunch of corporations, but it's all interlocking directorships, and majority shareholders are all the same families, et cetera, et cetera. And so they enforce it at the individual level through the policies that they put into place to restrict you like that, James.
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to see that. I know it's got to be a way, but just trying to find a way is hard. I've been looking.
Yeah. Oh no, very, very, very difficult. No question.
All right. Okay, that was my question. Thank you very much.
No problem. Good luck to you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for coming on. Okay, anybody else? Press star star 2 if you want to ask a question. Here we go. 30453. You've been unmuted.
Good evening, Angela.
Good evening.
Bob. I have a 4-part question for you. Back in the 1990s, there was a gentleman who used the Expatriation Act from after the Civil War to try and remove himself from the system. And actually, they were able to turn this around and use it against him, saying that he had to be first in the system in order to use the Expatriation Act to get out of the system. Now, without knowing all the details, which I don't know, or all the facts, would it appear to you that this might be a case where he hadn't properly got himself out of the system, even though he used the Expatriation Act? Or is this something that could come back to bite someone by using this expatriation document?
Well, if you look at it, if he's running into, if you don't have an affirmative, if you don't have affirmative evidence that in fact you are out, then presume, as they do, that they regard you as being in. So what I was talking about before with respect to the passport, they use the Social Security number to tag you to the vessel and identify you as a U.S. citizen. Now, you know from looking at the Social Security card, all right, that Social Security card doesn't belong to you. It belongs to them. And they've tagged it to the vessel, that name. And so then the question is, you know, how do you separate yourself from that? So the things that we were talking about in terms of the documents that we've put together, the acknowledgement, acceptance, and deed of reconveyance, the assumed name certificate, the FSIA mandatory notice, the act of expatriation and deed of or oath of allegiance, all those documents, they go to making a record of the fact that you are extricating yourself from that 14th Amendment citizenship back to on the land is your constitutional, not statutory individual, right? And so, you know, you have to be prepared to be able to, once you've made the record, you have to be prepared to be able to give them those documents whenever they ask you. So somebody in the chat recently was talking about how she carried around her birth certificate or certificate of live birth, depending, and I've known of people who, when a court case was called, they came forward and presented that and just said, you know, I'm here in relation to that matter, and presented the certificate of live birth. And, you know, they don't want to see that because, you know, the ones that know and understand, they know that that thing is, that's the person, okay? It's an account, and they've tagged it to you, right? And so, you know, you have to be prepared for the fact that anytime that you do that, they're going to do whatever they can to ignore it. And where they can't ignore it, then they're going to try and trap you and pull you back in, just like they do, like I described earlier with the passport instructions for the DS-11 form. You know, their systems are designed to always presume you to be a U.S. citizen, and so you just have to be persistent and be very, very aware and wary, because they use semantic deceit to try and put you in that box or keep you in that box, and so you have to be vigilant.
Well, we certainly didn't know in 1990 or the 1990s what we know today. So,
right, exactly.
The second part of my question is for people who are involved in Social Security, when they're filing these papers, then they're taking themselves out of that system entirely, whether it be the medical part of it or the benefit part, whatever.
Well, okay, you don't want to, you know, you want to have rights. You don't want to be, you know, beholden to them for benefits and privileges. Understanding that even though, you know, they've taken and stolen all that money, all right, that doesn't mean that they're off the hook for it. It's, you know, if you paid into Social Security, then that money, that's not a benefit. That's not a privilege. Okay, that's your money. And just because they stole it, so Anna says this all the time, you know, title doesn't transfer when, you know, when a pirate steals something, okay, they don't get good title over the property that they steal. And so, you know, you still have the ability to go and take your money out of that system and make a claim for the money that you put in there, and get that out of the system.
But just for the amount that you put into the system.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, you need to make a choice. You know, do you want to have rights, or do you want to have benefits and privileges? Understanding that the benefits and privileges are pretty much going away, right? Especially when they're bringing in, you know, 10, 20, 30 million people who, you know, are sucking off the system. I just saw somebody just sent me an article today where the IRS is giving tax returns to illegal aliens, tax refunds, right? To illegal aliens. It's like
Yeah.
You know, okay.
They're getting the earned income credit, even though they didn't pay anything
Yeah.
into it. So, yeah.
Right.
Well, I was kind of putting this Social Security question also in the considering the perspective of what you spoke about earlier when you used the example of the mother and the daughter with the hospital bill. Now, while that is while I conclude from what I know that is getting written off from what you said under a different process after you've taken the correct status or filed the correct and recorded the correct status, it still would appear that you're getting something out of that system. So I was kind of trying to relate this whole thing as to the Social Security. I get that this is, two different things in two different ways, I think, but you likely understand more about this than I do.
Well, so look at it from the perspective of the Social Security card is just one instrument, right? Certificate of live birth is another instrument. And they are taking your full faith and credit, and they are using that, all right? And that has a value. And you're the one who's putting that life, that spirit, that value into the system, all right? And so you're not getting a benefit from that. You're just paying it instead of giving them debt instruments, Federal Reserve notes. What you're doing is using the credit that they established in your name and have been siphoning off of for decades, since shortly after you were born and they established that account. And so what you need to do when you take control of that, and what that woman did with respect to her children is, she did the assumed name, and then she did the power of attorney, and then she stood in the proper capacity as the attorney, in fact, under the power of attorney, and she came forward and she acted in that capacity and made demands. She wasn't asking for benefits and privilege. She said, here's the way, do this and take care of the accounting for this. There's already credit in there from that person. And so attach that credit for however much the amount is that you're claiming, and set off and close these accounts.
Do we know at this point in time what that credit likely is on any one document or bond?
I've heard a million different estimates, and I would never, until I know, okay, I'm from Missouri, show me. And up until this point in time, nobody has been able to show me. So, if I were to throw a value out there, I'd just be guessing. I just know it's a lot. I mean, I had a guy that I work with who had somebody from DTC tell him that one of the instruments that he was asking them about had a value of $10.5 billion.
So would you think that it's fair to say that in their money system, the way they would compound interest on that or build up some kind of additional amounts to that bond, that would then belong to you, or that part would not be a credit to you?
No, of course it would. Understand, okay, they aren't doing anything wrong. I mean, they are in the sense that they're not providing full disclosure, but they're acting in the capacity of a usufruct. All right, they're there, and you are presumed dead or missing at sea. And until you step forward into your proper capacity and give them notice of the return of the heir, then they're just managing that estate property in your name. And so anything that they take and create from your credit belongs to you.
Okay. All right. And the third part is a number of people today feel that the use of non-statutory trusts is a good way to deal with some of these issues. Do you think that once you have your status corrected, that you could safely operate, and I guess you could look at the term operate in a commercial capacity or a personal capacity? Do you think one could go on living or operate without the use of any of these trusts, or do you still see, as time goes on and we look at different situations that people come into in the facts of their lives, that there would be a use for non-statutory trusts, or do you think you're then transgressing into the commercial area?
I think that so, for example, I think that common law pure trusts are very, very good vehicles. You know, the old adage still applies. It's, you know, own nothing and control everything. And and I think that, you know, I think that that's a very, especially given the system that we're living in, I think that that's a very, very sound wisdom. I really like the Weiss pure trusts and studied those a lot and have used them for a number of different things. And yes, I mean, it provides a level of control and insulation that I think is very valuable.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And the last part of my question is, there's some comments today and some thinking that we've been working on these various documents and doing various procedures, some of us for 30 or 40 years already, maybe even longer, and that we're never going to get this knocked, so to speak, by using the laws in this country and the Constitution, because they change everything at will. We're not part of the posterity. We're not the original framers of the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, you have to look at international law and such things as David Williams is doing with the right of self-determination. Do you think at this time that any of that needs to be done, or is going to likely need to be done as they keep changing things and clamp down as more and more people do the kinds of things that you're talking about tonight?
Well, I mean, you know, the most dangerous animal is a wounded animal. And right now, the system is collapsing. It's imploding upon itself. The fiat system is imploding upon itself, and the Federal Reserve and the central banks, you know, under the BIS have gotten themselves into a Gordian knot that they don't have any bullets left in the gun, and the problem is that where in, you know, early 1900s, where in 1933, where in 1999, you know, 2008, you know, they were able to sneak through these covert bankruptcies and have all of their debts washed away and have us as the sureties for those. That I think those days have passed, and they're no longer going to be able to, given all the changes that we've seen within the system and the level of knowledge of people. I think that these things are going to, I think that all the issues that we're dealing with are going to be taken care of in the relatively near future. But in the meantime, until they are, you've got a system that is morphing and growing into more and more of people's lives. And until you put it to a stop, you really have to just guard yourself. And this is one way to do it. You guard yourself against being presumed as surety for that vessel, and you take control and you navigate it. Since you can't operate in trade, then you operate in commerce, but it's not you because they can't see you, right? So that's where you use a trust structure for different purposes. And if you can get your records corrected in things like the databases, like the IRS, like we talked about, you know, early on, and the State Department with the passports, then you're going to be a long way towards being able to operate that vessel with your proper status established and recognized it by them and acknowledged by them.
Yeah, I guess inherent in my question, I was really asking whether or not, as any of us have been doing this for a long time and studying this, know things that we did back in the 80s or 90s, you know, don't work today because they've clamped down and there's, you know, they've changed it around and so forth and so on, and they tend to control it if you haven't separated yourself from that system. So in that, I'm just thinking that as more and more people do what you're talking about tonight, and they clamp down some more before the system, if that, you know, before the system finally collapses, is it going to be necessary to go all the way to international law to finally escape what we're dealing with until the system implodes in itself?
Well, I mean, from a theoretical perspective, I can see the argument. The problem that I have is, where do you enforce it? But yes, you absolutely are operating an international law when you do the things that we're talking about, because you're foreign to that United States corporation, right? You're foreign to that entity. And so, yes, you're absolutely. I mean, there's people that have gone out to the International Court of Claims. There's people that have gone to. There's people that have gone to International Criminal Court, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I haven't personally seen instances where people have been successful in establishing venue and jurisdiction there in their proper capacity in order to enforce claims and claims of right, et cetera, against these foreign entities. But yeah, I can absolutely wrap my head around the fact that would be a viable path to go down. But I'd need to educate myself in order to be able to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answers. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk.
No, enjoy the conversation.
And thank you, Angela, for putting on the program.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
I hope you feel better.
Thank you. I hope so too. I've been blowing my nose throughout this whole call and coughing.
Oh, you poor thing.
Thank God there's a mute button. Anybody else have a question or a comment? Press *2. Otherwise, we're going to call it a night.
Let's wrap it up.
Okay. I don't see anybody else up here, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to wrap it up.
Well, thanks, Angie. I always enjoy this.
Well, thank you for coming on. Oh, I wanted to ask you, whatever happened to Ken W?
Ken is just, he gets so immersed in his research. Yeah. He is up to his eyeballs and still slogging away, tracing through all the different places where patents and trademarks and copyrights and things like that have, basically allowed them to take control of assets and, enslave us on different levels. So yeah, I actually owe him a call. So I'll reach out and I'll let him know that I was on here and let's put together a call to get him on.
Yeah, I would like to have him on. He keeps, putting me off. So I guess he's busy. But I wanted to ask you also, is there like a conference call that Anna does? Or is somebody doing a conference call once a week, or is that private or?
No. I mean, we get together and do conference calls as we need to and pull together, people from different backgrounds depending upon what the issue is. But but there's nothing that's like a regularly scheduled thing. She's really, she jumps on like, when we did that call with you, if we give her enough time to schedule it, she's always willing to jump on and go through like the latest state of research and things like that. And be happy to ride her on that one if that's what you want to do.
Oh yeah, I'd love to have her on again. Everybody likes listening to what she has to say, and you. So it's good if you both come on, because then you can help explain some of the stuff she says. When it needs explanation. But yeah, I'd appreciate it. We should do that. I'll be in touch with you, and we can put something together, hopefully.
You got it, kid. Be happy.
All right, and Sam too. We gotta get Sam on.
Sam, I'll talk to him in the morning.
All right, tell him, give him my best, and tell him I want him on the call.
I will. You go get some tea and wrap yourself up in your jammies.
Thank you. I will, and my blankie. Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate it, and we all appreciate it. Thank you so much. Everybody, have a great weekend, and stay warm and take care of each other. And if you feel led to, a donation would be greatly appreciated, but it's not mandatory. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bob. Everybody, have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Good night.